Hello, everyone. My name is Bradley Smith, and I am the curator here at the Historic Ephrata Cloister. I'm coming to you today with another edition of our video Curator's Corner. Today, I'll be telling you a story about a historic structure that once existed on our grounds, but is no longer here. However, it does exist elsewhere. It's an interesting story, so stay tuned and learn more. So I'm going to begin my story in the year 1815. In that year, a detailed map of the historic Ephrata grounds was drawn by a man named Jacob Hipschman. And this is a great resource because it shows us both structures that still exist today and structures that are no longer standing. For example, some of the structures that we recognize are the Sisters Dormitory and Zoll, which I have highlighted here in green, and God's Acre Cemetery, which you can see, and in fact is marked on the map graveyard. Many of these other buildings, even the ones that are not here, we can sort of account for. We know what the buildings are. We expect to see them where they're shown on the map. But there's one that's interesting. It's kind of intriguing. It's this building right here. It's actually on the north side of what is today 322 or West Main Street of Ephrata. One structure in the entire Ephrata complex that is north of that street. It was once located in the approximate location of the present-day Sunoco station, which is just catty corner from the edge of our property. So while this is a Sunoco station today, 100 years ago, it looked like this. It contained this historic log house. And we believe this is this log building shown in the photograph, taken in the 1930s, is the very same structure shown on that map in 1815. And this building was known as the Cottage by the Way. We know this was called the Cottage by the Way in part due to the fact that it gets mentioned in newspapers from time to time, newspapers of 120 years ago. But it's always brief mentions, somewhat mundane topics. For example, the Ephrata Review, July 26, 1918, tells us Cloister notes an impromptu ice cream treat at the Cottage by the Way on Sunday evening last was immensely enjoyed. So it mentions it, but it doesn't really give us a whole lot of detail. On occasion, these articles will tell us that a certain person was living there as a tenant, but these little notes don't give us much additional information. We do not see too many additional records about this historic structure until 1968. In 1968, something interesting happens. The building is purchased by a local businessman, and he moves it about 200 yards to a new location next to the Cloister Country Store, which once existed at the intersection of 322 and present-day 272. Very, very close, right next door to the historic Ephrata Cloister Museum site. And this is a photograph probably taken in the very late 1960s, early 1970s. And you can see here in the foreground on the left, the Cottage by the Way has been moved to the parking lot of the Cloister Country Store. In the mid-1970s, a new owner acquires the Cloister Country Store, and with it, the Cottage by the Way. However, this new owner is not interested in maintaining this historic log structure, so he sells it to a wealthy family in Virginia. And to the best of our knowledge, that family transported the house to their estate and had it assembled there on their property as a sort of guest house. I don't know exactly where that is or who that was, If anyone out there in the listening audience knows more about this, I would love to hear this. For this could very well be the only surviving building with cloister history that is still out there, but not on our property. And I'd love to know where it wound up. Incidentally, this is the Cloister Country Store location today. It's now a medical office. And this is right behind the gift shop at the historic Ephrata Cloister, just 50 yards from where I'm sitting right now. So we know the cottage, by the way, was a historic structure here at the Ephrata Cloister. But one thing that's a little less clear is what was its purpose? When was it built? Who used it? How did it fit into the context of the larger site? At about the time the cottage was being moved to its new location, it was featured in a story in the Ephrata Review on December 12th, 1968. And the review made some interesting comments about the history of this structure. It said the following: the structure is thought by some researchers to be the home of John Miley, a miller who was known as Amos in the Cloister Brotherhood. It then goes on to say, Brother Amos lived there around 1739. This is an interesting theory. However, it's not consistent with historic documentation. In particular, we know that the Chronicon, the official history of the Ephrata Cloister, written by cloister members in 1786, tells us that in 1739, John Miley had moved into the brothers' dormitory on top of Mount Zion. This doesn't mean that John Miley did not live there later in his life. And there's one clue that hints at this possibility, and that is the 1783 will of John Miley. In the will, there's an interesting line. It says the following. It says that John Miley appoints brother John Frederick to oversee a certain group of items from his estate. And then he says, quote, and he shall keep them locked up in the cellar under my house for public use. So this implies two important bits of information. One, John Miley at this point is not living in a structure like Bethania, the brothers' dormitory. He's not living up on Mount Zion. He's apparently living in a smaller building that is his, specifically for him. And there's apparently some type of cellar that is a good place for storage and secure storage. This is very interesting because, fast forward about 200 years, the Lancaster New Era, August 24th, 1968, has an article talking about the cottage by the way. And it makes an interesting comment. The cottage was once accessible by a trap door near the rear of the main entrance room. The trap door is no longer there, but the original well-worn cellar steps are propped against one corner of the cellar wall. Could this be the same cellar that John Miley referred to in his will? It could very well be, which would suggest that while John Miley was not living here in 1739, perhaps he was living here when he wrote his will in the 1780s. The cottage, by the way, is of an architectural type very common to Pennsylvania Germans. And we know this right away by looking at the roof and noticing that even in the 1930s, it still had its center chimney, which is very unique to the Germans. In fact, even in 1968, when it was being moved, you can tell it still has a vestige of that original center chimney and fireplace. This type of structure is known by architectural historians as a Flurkuchen house. And that's a long word, but it actually has a simple meaning. It's three words, floor, kuga, and house. This means hallway, kitchen, house. So this is a hallway kitchen house. And it's called that because of the design. This is what the inside looks like of a typical hallway kitchen house. Very often they have a three-room floor plan, and you walk in and here's the hallway kitchen. Has a big center fireplace in the center of the building, which is again unique to the Germans. English don't do that. The Scotch Irish don't do that. The Germans do that. So that tells us this is uniquely German. So there's the hallway kitchen and the fireplace, a set of stairs going up to the loft. Then the next room is the parlor. And in the parlor, there typically would be an iron stove, a very simple iron stove, not much more than a box, that they called a jam stove. And then typically a small bedroom known as the Kammer. Sometimes instead of a three-room plan, there'd be a two-room floor plan. So it would just be the hallway kitchen and one very large room. Sometimes there'd be a four-room plan. There might be a sort of a multi-purpose room next to the hallway kitchen. Maybe used as a pantry, maybe even used as an extra bedroom. But this is a very, very common design, very ubiquitous or very common to the Pennsylvania Germans. And you see these all over the place. The cottage, by the way, is not the only Flurkuchen house on the grounds of the Erfurt Cloister. This structure, what we interpret today as the carpenter shop, is a Flurkuchen house. It's got all the hallmarks of a Flurkuchen house, like the center chimney and the hallway kitchen floor plan layout. Here we have another Flurkuchen house. This is known as the Peter Miller House. This was on our grounds until about 1890 when it disappeared. And again, you can see center chimney and this entrance leading to the hallway kitchen. When you look at the building on the left versus the cottage by the way, you'll notice some subtle differences just in the style and design. And I think the easiest way to describe this is that the one on the left is a very early Flurkuchen house. For example, seeing that dormer window is a sign that this is designed by people who were in Germany and are bringing very Germanic architectural style to their work in America. The cottage, by the way, however, is a little different in the sense that while it has the center chimney and the hallway kitchen design, it's a little bit more modern, a little less Germanic. You could almost think of it as a second generation Flurkuchen house versus the one on the left, which is a first generation Flurkuchen house. This is part of the reason why I disagree with the 1739 construction date for the cottage, by the way. It just doesn't have the hallmarks of a very, very early Flurkuchen house. It, to me, seems more consistent with late 1700s. Of course, this is just my opinion, my best attempt to ascertain the age of the home based on the details I can glean from a few photographs. I've never been able to see the inside of the home. We don't have any dendrochronology or carbon-14 dating. We don't have any historical records other than that 1815 map to know how long it has been here. That is the story of the cottage by the way. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. These things are very helpful to us. Please share this video with a friend. Let them know about the historic Gothic cloister and all the great history that we have here at our site. I thank you all very much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you again very soon. Take care.